Welcome to True Crime and Wine. I am Sherrilyn Dale and I am so glad you found me. Today's case that we're talking about is absolute madness, one of the most cold-blooded cult cases I have come across in a really long time. It involves extortion, sex, murder, all in the name of God. And it's important to bring attention to these cases because I feel like it's an eye-opener to how easily somebody can fall victim and be sucked in by people who are charismatic and very charming. Literal wolves in sheep's clothing out there. Before we get started and into the heaviness, I'd like to mentally prepare. And while we do that, hear about today's sponsor, which actually helps me tremendously when I need to just take a minute from the heaviness of cases. Thank you to Toon Blast for sponsoring today's video. You guys know me. My me time is usually lost in a game somewhere, decompressing after thinking about really heavy topics during the day, and I will actually reach for my phone several times for multiple minutes throughout the day to just kind of let go of what the information that I'm reading and retaining, and this allows me to just get a little bit more centered and less worked up, I guess. Toon Blast has been one of my go-to latelys. It's a free mobile game. There's over 7,000 levels of fun but challenging mini games to play. I love that you never know what your next mini game is going to be. I've just passed level 400, I think, and I've never felt like it's repetitive like I have with other games sometimes. It's an incredibly easy to learn game, and you totally just get lost in that world. It was no surprise to me to find out that there are millions of high rating reviews on Apple Store and Google Play. One of my absolute favorite parts of the game is that you get to actually compete with other players throughout the world for prizes. I'm super competitive, so I get right into that aspect. You can also create a team or join a team and work together for even more rewards, which is so fun. And something that I love is that there is no Wi-Fi, so you can play anywhere. There are no ads. I started playing last month when we were out visiting our family out east, and we spent about 27 hours on the road. Okay, you guys, seriously, this game is so fun. Today, I haven't got my daily bonus, so I'll do it with you. Okay, I love this. I think it's pronounced anvil, but you can just wipe out a whole row. So if you need, I usually save them till the end, and if I only have a couple moves left, then I'll just like wipe out the whole row and get along. Let's see what the day has for us. And this is all you do. You've got to like make matches, but you can get bombs and you can get dynamite sticks. And there's this one disco globe. It's my favorite one to get because it can actually just like wipe out the board for you. This is one of my favorite parts. I just made 2 matches here. So now we're going to join the bomb and the dynamite, and it's just going to start taking things out. I think that we should start a Sip and Dale team because you can play on teams like I mentioned. Oh my gosh, I'm starting that right now. So by the time you are seeing this message, there will be a Sip and Dale team on Toon Blast, and I would love for you to come and play with me. If you want to come and join, you can download the game through the link in my description. You will also receive 3 hours of unlimited lives. Like, that's a lot. That gets me excited. Plus 100 free coins. You can also scan the QR code. Seriously, I'm so excited just thinking about us having a team now, and I think we can chat in there as well. So make sure you download Toon Blast for free by just clicking the link in my description or in the pinned comments or using the QR code. Thank you so much, Toon Blast, for sponsoring today's video, and I cannot wait to build a team with you guys. All right, we need a riddle too today. What do the letter T and an island have in common? All right, today we are going to Marin County, which is across the Golden State Bridge from San Francisco. When you look up pictures of Marin, it looked absolutely beautiful. I hadn't heard about it before prior to this case, but I definitely got the kind of like smaller town vibes. I feel like that's kind of a theme lately with the cases that we've been covering. Everybody kind of knows everybody, and usually in those situations you kind of have like the local go-to hangout spot, and In today's case, particularly and within Marin, it was the Paper Mill Creek Saloon. One of the bartenders there, her name was Jenny Villarin. She was more than a bartender. She was like everybody's friend, everybody's confidant. She made it feel like you were just like sitting down, socializing, getting drinks poured for you, hanging out with a friend, which kind of sounds like just the absolute best gig for her as well. She didn't feel like work seemed like work. She enjoyed going every day and actually built like really genuine, authentic connections. She's described as like a free spirit. Her friends said the main word that came to mind when they thought of Jenny was loyalty. She was an absolute hoot to be with, very kind, very thoughtful, and she was always the one who remembered to call you first pretty much on your birthday. Basically everybody, they loved her. Even blues musician Elvin Bishop loved her. He actually wrote the song Fooled Around and fell in love about Jenny. I believe the two of them had met in Woodacre, and then they had gotten together. They had a baby girl that they named Selena, and they decided to move to Marin to have just more of a kind of like a small town family feel. Elvin continued pursuing his music career, which led to touring, and that definitely put a strain on the relationship. So they decided to part ways. And that led to Selena and Jenny just being a very, very close duo. Jenny was raising her as a single mother, and I think often that can really strengthen a parent-child bond, which was definitely the case for the two of them. They both considered each other their best friends. And when Selena turns 22, she's ready to kind of go out on her own, experience a little bit of independence, all while still keeping, in close touch with her mom, speaking to her daily. But that's like an exciting time. I remember going off for the very first time too. Now I look back and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I should have stayed at home longer. She also pursued a job in the service industry. She was a server at the Two Birds Cafe. She, like her mom, absolutely loved it. And she was able to move into kind of like a studio apartment. Now I believe it's one of those arrangements where it's kind of tucked away, like separate from somebody's home, almost like a garage style conversions within somebody's property. That's going to be important in just a minute here. On the evening of August 3rd, 2000, Jenny was working at the Paper Mill Creek Saloon. And on that evening, a good friend of hers, I believe it was kind of like he definitely had an interest in her. She had an interest in him. I've seen conflicting reports, though, whether they were actually in a relationship or just about to like kind of start seeing each other. But nonetheless, that evening, Jenny's friend, a gentleman named Jim Gamble, came to her work, and he brought her dinner at work. And their friends kind of said it must have been like a sweet gesture of being like, here, here's some dinner for ya. I'm thinking about you. And it seems like she definitely appreciated it, because at around 11 p.m. when she locks up the bar, she meets up with Jim. Now the two of them go back to Selena's apartment. Even though Jenny has her own apartment, she's actually house sitting for Selena this evening because Selena and her new boyfriend are scheduled to go on a getaway to Yosemite. At 5 a.m., Selena's landlord wakes up to the sounds of gunshots. He shoots out of bed and he can hear almost like running and then a car speed off. So he nervously walks to the apartment, and inside he finds Jenny and Jim shot in Selena's room. Jenny was still in the bed and Jim was beside the bed on the floor. So it kind of seems like there was a noise that they heard, and Jim was possibly getting up to check and see, and an intruder came in at that moment and shot both of them. Now, because of the unique setup of this apartment, and that you wouldn't really know unless you knew Selena or Jenny that anyone was really there, investigators immediately suspected that whoever did this deliberately targeted either Selena or Jenny. Other than that, there was really nothing to go by. There was no evidence besides a 9mm shell casing that was found beside the bed. Now, you just have to keep in mind that murders are extremely rare in Marin County, let alone a double homicide. I read that the last murder in that area had happened about 10 years prior to Jenny and Jim being killed. So basically, shock throughout the community is just an understatement. Absolutely not the correct word at all for it. Nobody can make sense of what would happen, especially to two people that were really well liked. Initially, the only thing that they could make sense of was that somebody must have followed Jenny to Selena's intending to maybe rob her. But that also kind of didn't make sense because there would have been far more money at the bar than on Jenny after she had locked up and somebody follow her. And nothing really seemed to be pointing at somebody targeting or following Jim either. His friends referred to him as like the gentle giant, just this very kind, generous man with an incredible sense of humor. He was a father of 2 sons. He was also somebody who would do absolutely anything for his mother, and he had recently retired from a software career. Those who knew him said that he was using this like free time to mostly take his mom on trips and go and visit his boys. So detectives are hearing from those who knew Jim and Jenny. They're hearing that, basically nobody has a bad thing to say about them. Everybody's world is absolutely shattered. But one person they can't speak to, who's very important to speak to, is Jenny's daughter, Selena. And instantly there's this concern that something may have happened to her. She could have been the target since this is her apartment that her mom was in. So they make a decision to enter her into the system as a missing persons report. They go on the news, talk about the murders, and also express how there's huge concern about finding and speaking to Selena immediately. Now, what investigators in Marin don't know is that the same day Jim and Jenny are found, an entirely separate team of investigators in Concord, which is about 50 miles east of Marin, are also dealing with a missing persons case. A woman named Nancy Hall had contacted police about a situation that just left her uneasy at her parents' home that day. She said she went to go check on her parents, 78-year-old Annette and 85-year-old Ivan Steinman, earlier on in the day because she had not been able to get a hold of them, which was pretty rare. And when she walks up to their house, she sees 4 newspapers that are still outside. They're dated from the 30th of July to the 3rd of August, which is definitely out of character for them to not bring them in the house or even just call and pause the services if they were just going to go out of town somewhere. She's got a key, so she lets herself in and she walks around the house, but there's no sign of them. Initially, when she looks around, nothing seems too concerning. She goes upstairs though, and she goes into one of the washrooms and the door is closed. And when she opens up the door, one of their cats is in there. Again, if the 2 of them had gone out somewhere, it would be very out of character for them to just lock one of the cats in the bathroom with no food or water. And when she went downstairs, she finds the other cat is actually locked out of the house. Again, there's no food or water left for the cat outside. As she's trying to make sense of all of this, she sits on the couch to just take a minute, and right in between the cushions, she notices her father's watch. And when she picks up the watch, it looked kind of damaged, almost like part of the band was torn, almost like there was somebody who had pulled on it and to try to rip it off, or he was trying to rip away from somebody. Seeing the watch damaged like that, being where it was on the couch, and then adding together with the cats and the newspapers, instantly her gut was like, this is concerning. So she called the police. She said the last time that she spoke to her parents was 4 nights earlier. It was on the 31st of July around 8:30 p.m. And at the time, she didn't think too much of it, but when she's looking back and thinking about the call, she thought her mom maybe sounded a little bit short with her, kind of impatient. She said she had company over at that time and couldn't talk, but wouldn't elaborate on it. And again, it wasn't something that she thought much of at the time, but then thinking about it later, she's like, well, I guess she really didn't tell me who was over or why she was so quick to get off the phone. Usually that would be an okay thing to be like, oh, Susie's over right now. And were just chatting or having some tea or whatever they do. She usually wasn't like quick to get off the phone and not give any form of explanation. She was happy to share with her daughters like what was going on in her life, and that wasn't the case this evening. Looking into the Steinmans, there's absolutely nothing that would be concerning or lead investigators to believe that they would be deliberately targeted for something. Their daughters said that they lived in a very good neighborhood. Everybody knew them in the neighborhood. They would always wave to like the older couple who they just all thought were adorable. Everybody loved them. And even though that they were in a new chapter in their lives, they were 2 months away from celebrating their 55th wedding anniversary. They had saved a really nice retirement from their careers at Chevron. They're kind of like enjoying their golden years together, but it would be very uncharacteristic of them to just go somewhere and vanish. If they were going to go somewhere on a trip, they would let somebody know. Speaking to the neighbors, the only thing that seemed unusual around the time that the Steinmans would have been last seen was that their neighbor across the street had noticed 2 men that were walking around the neighborhood around that time. This neighbor thought that maybe they looked like Mormon missionaries. They had suits on. And around 9:30 p.m. that evening, he saw these 2 people walking up to the Steinmans' porch. That was all this person saw, though. They just noticed them walking, going up to the Steinmans, and really didn't keep looking. I'm very curious, though. I feel like I would have been like, kept searching out the window. I'm definitely going to be like the neighbor from Bewitched who's just spying on everybody. That wasn't the case here, though. So the neighbor actually didn't know if these people even had gone into the home. Now, remember, the search for Selena is also simultaneously going on over in Marin. And those investigators find out from Selena's friends and family that she had recently gotten into a relationship with a guy about 3 months prior, but they didn't know much about him besides the fact that his name was Jordan and that the 2 of them had met at a rave. Selena had told her mother when she started a relationship with Jordan about him. She basically just said that, you know, he was tall, he was good looking. She liked him because he seemed a little bit different than the guys that she knew within Marin County. He seemed to have like a little bit more life experience and more adventure to him. Some of Jenny's really good friends did know about Jordan. Jenny had told them, you know, that her daughter was seeing somebody and she wasn't really sure how to feel about the situation. She was happy that her daughter seemed to be very happy, but she didn't like that he seemed reluctant to meet her. Jenny said that as far as she knew, he hadn't even told Selena his last name, his home phone number, or allow him to take pictures of him. Like there weren't any pictures of the 2 of them together. She really wanted to meet this guy who was in her daughter's life, and so it's naturally concerning that because the 2 of them are basically like best friends, she doesn't know who is seeing her daughter. So she comes up with an idea to finally meet him. She and one of her close friends decide to just go to Selena's apartment, unannounced kind of, and Jenny was going to go up to the door and ask if she could borrow a blouse and see if he was there. And he was. Jenny went in while the friend waited outside. She went and grabbed the blouse, quickly met him, and then came back out, and the friend was like, you know, what's the vibe? And she said, well, yeah, he's cute. But this was like just a seconds exchange. It was like in and out. And she's just going based off of, you know, first impressions. I think after being able to put a face to the name, she was more comfortable to ask Selena a little bit more questions about him. And I think Selena was a little bit more comfortable to talk about him. So Jenny's friends had said that Jenny found out that he was in the middle of a divorce and it wasn't really going well. Selena was concerned with how she could help Jordan because she said he was set to inherit about $100,000 and he was wanting to shelter this from his ex so that she couldn't get any of that money in his account through this divorce. And he had asked Selena to put the money in her account. As far as Selena and Jenny's friends knew, they weren't sure if this had actually happened. But this is a huge ask of somebody, especially in kind of like a newer relationship if you've only been seeing this person for about 3 months. So the investigators decide to focus on like who's Jordan. Some of Selena's coworkers at the Two Bird Cafe were actually really helpful because they had met him when he would come to the cafe to visit Selena during her shift, and they knew that he lived with his brother, who was a guy named Justin, and they lived somewhere in the East Bay. Now, this could be just like a massive range of places for detectives to even try to search through, but by a stroke of luck, her co-workers had come across a huge clue for detectives, and that was that Selena had left her pager behind at the Two Bird Cafe. Now, when detectives pull up the records of who's paging Selena, there's no record of a Jordan coming through, but there is a number that comes through for a Justin Helzer. Given that Selena's coworkers had mentioned that Jordan lived with a brother named Justin, they start looking into his background. They learned that Justin Helzer was briefly registered in the military but was released. At the time of their investigation, he was a model employee at a cable installation company. And investigators were also able to find out that he had purchased a 9mm handgun 2 months prior. Now, this is the same style of shell casings that were found at Selena's apartment where Jenny and Jim were murdered. Through investigating, looking into the address that they have on record for Justin, they do find out that he lives with a brother. This brother's name is not Jordan, though. It's Glenn Taylor Helzer. And they find out that he goes by his middle name, Taylor. So they print photos of the two brothers and they take them to Selena's friends and coworkers. And her coworkers are able to positively identify Taylor as being who they know as Jordan. Digging into his public records, they find out that Taylor is a licensed stockbroker. He was born in 1970 in Lansing, Michigan, and he was born into a very religious family. They are deeply active in the Mormon church. And according to family and friends, the Helzers had lived like a relatively normal childhood. I don't know what that looks like anymore. Taylor's described as the older, more outgoing, charming brother, and Justin was more introverted and kept to himself. People who knew the two of them said that it was definitely clear Justin looked up to Taylor. He seemed to constantly be seeking approval from his brother, and his brother would like refer to each other as like, me, I'm Taylor, I'm number one and you're number two. So that's kind of like how he just went through life thinking like he's the top guy, I'm number two guy. After graduating, they kind of were able to go their separate ways. They both went to go fulfill Mormon requirements of completing 2 years on a mission. Taylor went to Brazil and Justin went to Texas. And through the church, Taylor is looked at this like natural leader. He had this insane ability to just like make people feel very seen, very heard, which led to a great deal of trust. And they looked at him like as like the star converter. He brought loads of people into the Mormon church. After their Mormon mission, they had both returned back to California. Justin got a job as a cable installer, and then Taylor as a stockbroker at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter in San Francisco. And about this time, Taylor ended up dating a gal. They get married in 1993. They had 2 daughters together, but his wife said about 3 years into the marriage, they separated after Taylor had decided that he was, what she said, tired of being a good Mormon. His ex-wife said that he verbalized that he was feeling constrained by his religion. He was wanting to try quote unquote normal life. And she describes his version of a normal life as drinking, sleeping with other gals, smoking. And when he started doing this, it eventually led the church to excommunicate him for his behavior. Close family members of his at this time said that he seemed very hyper-focused on mental illness. There was a family member of his who had actually been admitted to a psych facility, and he had a lot of questions about it. He was like, okay, well, how does everybody act when they're in there? Do they act like this? And he would kind of like put on a performance. And not long after this, I just find it interesting, he ended up getting disability from his work after he allegedly had a nervous breakdown while he was on shift. So it made me think of, okay, was with all of the questions being asked about like how somebody asks if they're mentally unstable, suffer from mental illness, was it an act? Nonetheless, there are people within his circle that did feel that he did shift. His beliefs became a little bit more erratic. And he started talking about believing that he was a prophet from God and that he was able to receive messages directly from God. Now, simultaneously, as the investigators are piecing all of these different cases, it seems, together, the Steinman's disappearance is starting to make quite a bit of headway. Their minivan was found. It was found in an area in Oakland that was described as not like the best area, not somewhere where they had family or friends and would have just like gone to hang out at. And there were also signs that it wasn't the Steinmans who had left it there when the police found it. The windows were down and there was rap music that was still blaring, which again was not their music of choice. Not that there's anything wrong with listening to rap music if you're elderly. I do believe that like when my husband is in his 80s, he will still be listening to Tupac. Even though the Steinmans' van was found, they were not found. So the police hold a press conference and they ask for the public for help in locating the Steinmans. They show a photo of the two of them and they also show a photo of their van. At the time of this press conference, a bank manager is getting ready for work and she sees on the news the Steinmans' face flash across her screen and she gasps because they were her clients. She calls and meets with the police and she says that 5 days earlier on August 2nd, she was at work when all of a sudden a woman in this bright green outfit with this gold cowboy hat and in a wheelchair comes in. Not only was her outfit noticeable, but she directly goes to the manager's office and says, "Are you the manager?" She says yes. This woman introduced herself as Jackie and said that she had a couple of large checks she needed to deposit. The bank manager looks at the checks and they're not written out to a Jackie. They're written out to a Selena Bishop and they're written from the Steinman's joint bank account. So the bank manager's perplexed, like, where is Selena? Who is Selena and why is she not here depositing it? And these two checks are very large. The two of them total $100,000. Jackie says that she is a friend of the family. Selena is the granddaughter of the Steinmans and she needed a open heart surgery. It was going to cost $100,000 and it was her grandparents, the Steinmans, that were paying for it, and she was simply there because she was helping the family get this all deposited, take a little pressure off, and get Selena her surgery ASAP. The manager was feeling really uneasy about the situation, but she takes the checks and she says she's going to complete the deposit once she can confirm all of the information by the other parties involved. So at the time that she sees this press conference, she hadn't been able to do that yet, which is why this whole situation stood out to her and she was immediately concerned. This ends up being a massive lead and it brings the Concord and the Marin investigators together when the Concord police are trying to locate Selena Bishop, and then they find out from the Marin investigators that Selena Bishop is a missing person and her mother and her mother's friend have been murdered. At this point, the only people who seem to be involved in this in any way are the Helzer brothers. So the investigators get together a search warrant trying to locate the 9mm handgun that was registered to Justin. And they aren't messing around either when they go there. They end up showing with full SWAT who just like blast in. They find Taylor, they find Justin Helzer, and they also find a 26-year-old woman named Dawn Godman. Dawn is somebody who grew up in the Sierra Nevada foothills. She is described as somebody who was a a loner in high school. She had latched onto a relationship after graduating. She married at 18 years old. She gave birth to a son who died not long after birth, had a second son who did live, but her and her husband ended up divorcing, and her ex-husband was the one who was granted custody. The reason for this was Dawn had gone through some struggles in her life that had led to an attempted suicide attempt. She was living out of her car, so the court felt like the child would be in better care being with the father. So during this obviously low point in her life, a friend of hers decides to introduce her to the Mormon church. And this is something that Dawn says she credited for saving her life at that time. Through one of the church events, she met Taylor Helzer in 1999. Allegedly, the Mormon temple was holding a murder mystery dinner event on Memorial Day of 1999, and the guests that went there got clues to a murder mystery, and then in order to attempt to solve it, you had to sit and interact with each other. The Helzer brothers were there, and Dawn said that they quickly approached her, Taylor specifically, and it really caught her off guard. He seemed to be showing a lot of interest in her, and she wasn't somebody that she considered people showing a lot of interest in her. She felt that she was out of Justin and Taylor's league, so when they approach her, she's just like gobsmacked. And when they want to spend more time with her and become close with her and become roommates, she quickly agrees. There have been reports that she dated Justin Helzer, but was very fascinated and enamored with Taylor. So after the SWAT team busts through and police are taking the three of them to the police car to bring them in for questioning, Taylor escapes. He starts running through the neighborhood. He's just in his boxers, and he goes to one of his neighbor's house and he starts knocking on the back door, and the woman answers thinking that it's her son's friend. Quickly finds out that's not the case. He tells her, "If you call the police, I'm going to kill you." Grabs a knife from the counter and says he needs some clothes and a pair of scissors. Terrified, she complies. She says he gets dressed, he cuts his long ponytail off, and then he just books it. This woman calls 911. She's able to communicate with dispatch to give her address and an area of where he is at that moment. And as he's bolting through the yards and hopping fences, police are able to surround him and detain him. Allegedly, when they finally got him to the car, he even escaped out the back window again, but then quickly was chased down and brought in. During the full search of their home, the police come across some items that definitely throw up some red flags. They find leg irons, a taser, a rope, duct tape, and the drug Rohypnol, which is also known as the date R-word drug, pretty much like a subdue contain kit. And they also find documents with the Steinman's names on them, which one of the detectives describes as just like hair raising, because at this point they're trying to tie them together with Selena and her mom and Jim, and now these investigations, everybody is coming together. They also noticed that the carpet in the house was damp. It looked like it had just recently been professionally cleaned, and there were carpet blowers on it to dry, and some of the areas had some red and pink stains. Luminol is sprayed throughout the house, and they find a number of areas in the house that show up to have blood stains, particularly in the living room as well as the bathroom. They don't find a gun, though, or really enough evidence of proof that anything happened to Selena or the Steinmans in this house. At this point, really the only thing that they can do is arrest Taylor for forcibly entering into his neighbor's house, and then they also arrest Justin and Dawn on drug possession charges for having Rohypnol in the home. As they are trying to process even more evidence, another gruesome discovery is made by a jet skier about 40 miles away. So now even further out, more people are being brought into this investigation. This jet skier is on the Mokelum River, and he comes across a duffel bag. He takes this duffel bag back to shore, curious. I'm sure he could think of a million things that could be in there, maybe some like cash or treasure. Unfortunately, it was not. When he opened up the duffel bag, he found body parts. When police are called to the scene, they explain it as just horrific. Inside the bag, it was clear to them that these were parts that belonged to different people, 3 people from what they could tell. It looked like a older man, an older woman, and then a younger woman. With something like this, word spreads very fast, and investigators from Concord and Marin are notified by the duffel bag discovery. And one identifying factor that made them believe that this could be their missing victims is that the younger female had a patch of skin removed from her back shoulder area. And they knew from Selena's loved ones that Selena had a tattoo here. So they suspected that this was probably done to try and make it harder to identify those remains. Identifying the remains, period, was a very emotional, disturbing task. Over the next few days, even more duffel bags were found. There was a total of 9 bags. And the Sacramento County coroner took more than a week to sort through the parts and piece the victim essentially back together. Like, absolutely gruesome. After the Steinman's daughters and family members of Selena's were called to provide DNA to match against the remains, they were able to positively identify the 3 victims as Ivan, Annette, and Selena. After this discovery, this case started to come together even quicker. It's believed that the Helzer brothers kidnapped the Steinmans in order to extort them for $100,000 and force them to write checks to Selena Bishop, who I can only imagine how confusing and terrifying that would have been. It's like they don't know why this is happening and they don't know who Selena Bishop is. But it's even more unsettling on why they became targets. And it's because they did know Taylor Helzer. Taylor was the Steinman's stockbroker. He was aware of their finances, and when the Steinmans found out this connection, they were devastated because they knew that their parents completely trusted Taylor. He had cultivated this relationship with them over the years. He would stop in and visit them. He had even taken the Steinmans and their daughter river rafting one summer. Ivan Steinman's daughter said that her dad considered them buddies, and because he didn't have a son, it was like he kind of liked the idea of having like a young guy who wanted to hang out with him. It's so upsetting and so disturbing because this was calculated. Investigators found a list of about 5 former clients. And I guess the Steinmans actually weren't even the first on this list. There was another gentleman who had lived in a nearby town in Walnut Creek that they initially went to, but he wasn't home. And so they moved on to the number 2 slot of the list. And that's where the Steinmans were. Now, it's believed that Taylor and his brother went to the Steinmans like he would often do to go and check in, knocked on the door, was invited in. Dawn was waiting nearby in a pickup truck, and they used shackles that they had purchased at a local adult bookstore to gain control of their victims and brought them back to the Helzer home. It's there that they believed they forced them to write checks to Selena and ultimately murdered them after that was done. And Selena was used to just launder the money in Taylor's eyes. Everything he told her about inheriting money and trying to keep it from his wife was a lie. When police showed the Steinman's bank manager a photo of Dawn Godman, she was able to identify that as being the woman that she knew of as Jackie trying to deposit this check from the Steinmans to Selena. At this point, they're clearly making a lot of headway in their missing persons case, but they are having a harder time connecting the Helzer brothers to the double murder of Jenny and Jim. That is until they are pouring through the Helzer brothers' phone records, and they see a number that comes up a number of times. It's registered to a woman named Deborah, so they contact her, bring her in for an interview, and she says that she's a friend of Taylor's. And initially, she tries to provide an alibi for the trio, Taylor, Justin, and Dawn, saying that the night the Steinmans were abducted from their home, she bought tickets for the X-Men film, and that the four of them were all together having like a dinner and movie night. It's when she's confronted with all of this evidence and seemingly pointing to the three of them being involved in this just gruesome, horrific crimes, she finally tells them the truth and says, okay, like, I bought those tickets. I was asked to buy the tickets. We actually never went to dinner and a movie, and Taylor and Justin and Dawn actually showed up at my house and asked if I could store a safe for them. She turns over the safe, and inside it are the Steinmans' wallets, their checkbooks, Selena's driver's license, and at the bottom of the safe, the piece that they were hoping to finally find, they found a 9mm handgun. This was finally also able to include Jenny and Jim in these charges. And at this point, their charges are increased to include extortion, false imprisonment, robbery, and burglary, and murder. Now, the whole motive behind this is so unsettling, hard to understand, but it leads back to this whole Taylor believing that he was able to communicate with God. He believed he was a prophet of God, and he was sent to carry out this sacred mission. From those who knew the brothers, it seemed pretty easy for Taylor to convince Justin of this mission and have him on board. And it seems very intentional of how they chose Dawn as well, being somebody who was caught off guard by their presence and really liked the attention. Not only that, but allegedly Taylor had also signed her up for self-awareness seminars when they first met to try to like better herself. But this was like very extreme. I guess you would spend days in a room without any windows. The person who was facilitating it was like very aggressive, kind of even like badgered and belittled you. And after Dawn had completed 2 of the 3 levels of this program, Taylor had decided to then kind of step in and take over and teach like his spiritual guidance. At this point, he then convinces her that he's also a prophet of God. And he starts sharing his big plan of defeating Satan and starting a self-help group. He said that he felt it was his destiny to overtake the Mormon church. In order to do this, they were going to need a lot of money. So they were going to have to find people to extort and take this money from, but it was all for, the greater good. In Dawn's eyes, she was considering this being a blessing, that she was brought in on this mission. She believed everything that he said and couldn't believe that he wanted her involved. And he really solidified that when he created the name. He created the name the Children of Thunder. I guess this name was chosen from a verse in the Bible that refers to the Sons of Thunder. But since the core group was Taylor, Justin, and Dawn, he changed it to children to include her. I think it's just really important to recognize that and just see those tactics, because when you look at things through her eyes, that probably would have felt like a really big deal. Not only are you brought into this, but now you're like being thought of as someone, these people are including you in this like flagship entry into the world. And again, these are people who she considers out of her league. It feels blessed to even talk to them and breathe the same air in the same room with them. She has low self-esteem, absolutely no confidence. And so she's basically like a cult leader's poster book for a loyal follower. And when she was arrested and those charges had escalated, it was very clear to her attorney that she was heavily involved under Taylor's influence and control. She just kept insisting, like, everything's fine. This is all part of, like, the divine plan. She absolutely believed that he was just going to walk in and come and save the day. And it was, you know, they were right all along. So she basically needed to be reprogrammed through therapy, went through extensive therapy, and then finally came out realizing the gravity of the situation and that she was not a part of any form of religious mission, but just a gruesome murder in the name of greed, not God. I just want to emphasize too, I know that that's probably very hard to understand, and I in no way sympathize for Dawn. What she was involved in was absolutely deplorable, but it's why I feel like it's important to talk about these cases and just highlight those moments to just spread awareness and an understanding of the power of manipulation and control and brainwashing, especially in somebody like Dawn. You know, you might be able to recognize a piece of you in Dawn or somebody that you know, and even if you're somebody polar opposite who feels like, oh, I would never let that happen, there could be somebody that you know that it rings a bell right now that it could happen to, and to just be mindful of these tactics. Dawn's lawyers were able to make a deal with prosecutors to take the death penalty off the table if she would plead guilty and testify against Taylor and Justin. She agreed, and she was given a 38 years to life prison sentence. On March 6th, 2004, the Helzer brothers go to trial. Right before proceedings are about to start, though, Taylor decides to plead guilty to all charges. His brother Justin does not. He ends up pleading not guilty by reasons of insanity. His defense lawyer had definitely tried to make him look like a mentally ill follower of his brother who had all of the control. There was testimony from Helzer family members that, yes, there was a history of mental illness in their family. And they really tried to push the idea that Justin wholeheartedly believed that Taylor was this prophet of God and being told to do all of these things, and wasn't able to understand that the murders that he was being involved in were morally wrong. Dawn's testimony ended up being crucial. In her opinion, she believed that Justin was a willful participant and he was intricate in creating all of this, as well as Taylor. She shared that there were multiple plans that they had run through to try and overthrow the Mormon church so that Taylor could become the leader. She said that there was one plan of bringing orphans from Brazil, that he knew of an orphanage when he had done his mission trip out there, and have them sneak into the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City and massacre the church leaders. Another was, again, to take underage girls from Brazil, have them seduce wealthy married businessmen, and then try to blackmail them later into giving them money to fund the church. Ultimately, they settled on a list of Taylor's clients from his broker, come on, Sherrilyn, portfolio. During Dawn's testimony, she also spoke about the final hours of the Steinman's life, and I can't imagine the fear that they would have felt after they were brought to the Helzer brothers. They were instructed to call the manager of their broker, come on, Sherrilyn, jeez, broker branch, and asked to liquidate their assets. And it was Annette Steinman that was doing it. And the manager had also testified that she sounded nervous. It wasn't something that was of concern at that moment, but looking back on the fact, it was like there was quite a level of like tension, fear, like urgency. So you know at that point that she's being forced to do this, knows that all of their retirement and their money is going to be taken from them, and have no idea what's going to happen to them. Dawn said they were forced to take Rohypnol and write out the checks. The hope was that they were going to just overdose and die, but they didn't. She said that they were very intoxicated. They were barely breathing, but were still alive, and the brothers led them very incoherent and wobbly to the washroom. This is where Justin bashed Ivan's skull into the ground, and Taylor actually cut Annette's throat while Dawn watched. The next day, it was Justin who dismembered the bodies with the power saw. She said after the three of them all sat together and thanked the Steinmans in some prayer ritual for willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater cause. Like, how effing infuriating would that be as a family member listening to that? Like, they did not choose to sacrifice themselves, and how are you to be thankful? You like, how about we just do not murder somebody in cold blood? She said when the dog that they had purposely adopted for this reason that I'm about to share did not want to eat the remains, it's then that they decided to place them in gym bags and throw them into the river. When it came to Selena, according to Dawn, it was always the plan to just use Selena to launder the money, put it through her account. When it came through, she would be sacrificed as well. That plan ended up getting expedited when the bank manager was holding the funds to confirm everything, and they felt like there was no other choice but to get rid of her before she was able to speak. And Dawn said that Taylor invited her over to his house, where he offered to give her a massage on the living room floor. And while he was doing that, his brother came up from behind and struck her repeatedly in the skull with a hammer. It was then they also brought her to the bathroom where the Steinmans were dismembered. And at this point, they also realized that Dawn was still alive as well. And the same thing that happened to Annette, involving her throat, was also done to Selena. Dawn confirmed that they did remove the area of skin where Selena's tattoo was to make it harder to identify her. They also tried to feed this to the dog and then ultimately put her in duffel bags as well. Like, it's just so horrible, so disturbing to try to get through. Barbaric. Absolutely barbaric. And when it came to Jenny, she was murdered simply because she saw what Taylor looked like when she stopped by Selena's house that day. He didn't want to take any chances of being identified, so he knew that Jenny was going to be house sitting for Selena. He had told Selena they were going to go to Yosemite and had her ask her mom to house sit for her. He used the key that Selena had given him to be able to access her apartment, went in, intending on just killing Jenny. Not that that makes anything better, but Jim was there as well. And so Jim also lost his life. And it was explained in court, like, Jim was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's like, no, nobody should not be able to just go hang out with their friends, spend the evening with somebody because you might be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, how about the other person just doesn't kill people? I don't know. It was one of the Helzer's neighbors that was able to tie them to the duffel bags. They had seen the Helzer brothers leave with a truck and they were towing jet skis. And then a surveillance camera actually filmed that same vehicle, which was Justin Helzer's truck, crossing over a bridge heading to the river that the bags were found in. Ultimately, a jury found Justin Helzer guilty for his role in the murders and the extortion scheme. I guess just before the penalty phase was beginning, he had screamed out to the courtroom that he wanted life to be over and to die. The jurors had to be let out. Then he apologized to the judge. He's like, oh, I just want to make it clear that I don't want to be here. On March 11th, 2005, he and Taylor were both sentenced to death for taking the lives of these 5 innocent victims. Justin did take his own life on April 14th, 2013. Taylor Helzer is still on death row, and Dawn Godman is eligible for parole in 9 years. You're watching this in another year besides 2023. She's eligible for parole in 2032. I think we wrap this up because I have so many emotions. I just feel so ill right now. This is so unnecessary, so disturbing. But I think Selena's aunt said it best, and I absolutely resonated with those words, and that's how we're going to wrap up this case, because there's no other way to say it besides the fact that Taylor Helzer is the second coming of Manson, not of Christ. Freaking sickening. Okay. Whew, these cases take a number on me, but again, like I said, I do feel like it's important because these people, you can't understand how they work or how someone could follow, but they do. They're charismatic. They're able to do it. And as outlandish as it seems, they have people who believe in them and carry out these horrific crimes. Like, please, if somebody is to tell you, we need to do these crimes and extort people and murder them for the name of God, run, please, and report it. Save these people's lives. Like that's what we should be doing. Saving, not taking. Okay, that is it for me today. If you have not already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for helping me raise awareness for cases like these. I hope you will come back and we can see each other again. The answer to today's riddle is, what do the letter T and an island have in common? And the answer is they are both in the middle of water. An island in the middle of water, water, T, and okay, you got it. All right. Also, thank you once again to Toon Blast. I really hope that we can all go and decompress after this video. We know we need it. Join the Sip and Dale's team on there so we can play together. I believe we can chat together. That would be really nice and cool. You can download in my description, in the pinned comment, or on this QR code. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.